when a woman said to me, "You saved my life." And, she had come to me kind of in this stage where her husband had cancer. So she was taking care of him. She's having difficulties with her daughter, neglecting her own health, was on antidepressants, didn't work for her. She was at a point where she just didn't want to be here anymore. And we did that deep work. And really, when I think back to what I actually did with her, it was really the simple things, which is giving her permission and hope.
Welcome to the Inflammation Code podcast. It's me, your host, Dr. Shivani Gupta, and I have a very special guest in store for you guys today, Dr. Sonya Jensen. So I'm going to tell you guys a little bit about her before I bring her on to ask all my questions. She's a naturopathic doctor and women's health expert whose work focuses on helping women decode the deeper roots of hormonal imbalance. Her upcoming book, Heal Your Hormones, Reclaim Yourself, introduces her signature HER method, which is a powerful framework that's designed to connect the dots between hormonal chaos, emotional overload, and relationship pain. Rather than treating symptoms in isolation, Dr. Jensen helps women understand how their mood swings, fatigue, anxiety, irritability, and disconnection are often deeply intertwined, biologically, emotionally, and relationally. What I appreciate about her approach is she doesn't just talk about estrogen and cortisol, which we're hearing about a lot nowadays, but she talks about our identity, our boundaries, our nervous system health, which you guys know I'm very into, and the ways that we as women can tend to lose ourselves in the process of trying to hold everything together. Her work invites women to move from confusion and burnout to clarity, balance, and self-trust. So welcome, Dr. Jensen.
Oh, thank you. That was such a beautiful intro and summary of everything I want to bring to the world. So thank you for that.
For sure. So let's kick off with what brought you to doing this work, to becoming a naturopathic practitioner, and to eventually getting to writing a book on this topic.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a long story, but I'll try to shorten it as much as possible. And before we got on the call, we were talking about our Indian background. And when you are of that descent, often studies and education is really, there's an exclamation mark after that when it comes to women and men. And so growing up, it was something that was the forefront that you've got to study. And, my brain was definitely more on that left-sided brain. I was going into science and did cell biology, got a degree in cell and molecular biology. But in my heart, I always knew I wanted to do something to support and help others, but I didn't know what that looked like. I mean, when I was young, it's oh, I'm going to become a cop or I'll become a lawyer because I really want to support people. And I started to understand over the years why I have this desire to, I think, first rescue people because I think I needed that growing up. And so I went down this route of science and didn't really know what I was going to do. I went into massage therapy school. And then one day I actually called the wrong number and ended up calling the naturopathic school and started asking questions. I'm like, well, what is this? And she, the woman on the other end started telling me about what modalities they use. And I'm like, oh, this is how I grew up. I mean, my nanaji, my maternal grandfather, these are the herbs that he gives me when we're sick or whatever. And so I got really intrigued and then stepped into, just within 2 weeks was now in naturopathic school.
Wow.
Yeah. And then through that journey, as you probably know too, when you're doing this kind of work or understanding and learning it, you have to uncover everything about yourself and start healing. And I actually ended up going through a divorce in those 4 years, which was really difficult, coming from the culture that we do, and was disowned by my family for quite some time because there was just confusion and upheaval. But I had to make that decision because in my 3rd year, I started to see women sitting in front of me that were mirroring what my life would look like 20, 30 years from now with illness if I didn't create change now. And so fast forward, I've got my clinic with my husband now, and I started working with women and just seeing the same stories coming in over and over again about how important it is for us to understand our story and express that story, or else our body will express it for us.
It's so true. And I love that we're going to dive into this topic today because my theme for 2026 in my podcast is to dive so much deeper into women's health
Mm.
and why it is that we struggle with the issues we struggle with. And I love naturopathic medicine, Ayurvedic medicine, Chinese medicine. We are all on the same
Yes.
road. It's just
Yeah.
like different language towards the exact same philosophies and concepts. And we all love the super spices and super herbs in all three of those modalities. And then the next I would add is like acupuncture, which is part of traditional Chinese medicine, chiropractic.
Yeah.
All these integrative modalities have our own lens on how to approach health. And so it's beautiful when someone finds us and is like, oh my gosh, this is what I needed.
Mm.
And a lot of times when people find me and I do a discovery call with them, I'm like, actually, what you're saying is you need her. And I'll
Right.
just send them out to the person who needs them most
Yeah.
or to be served by who needs them. So when you went through this journey and you
Yeah.
discovered these patients in front of you who were really showing you and mirroring to you what life could look like 20 to 30 years down the line, how did you kind of take the next step into diving deeper into those issues, and what did you uncover about women's health that was so alarming to you?
Yeah, so
Irritability.
these women, they were either have like an autoimmune condition. And the one thing that each of them said to me, I just don't feel like myself. And so that was a bit of red flag. Then I'm trying to uncover, well, what does that actually mean? It's like how I see the world is changing, how I see myself is changing, my relationships are changing, to the point where sometimes I don't even want to be here anymore because it's so overwhelming. So that's when I really started to see like there's something deeper going on here. Yes, our physiology is changing as we age, our hormones are, getting more depleted. There's toxins in the environment. Like there's so much that contributes. But when a woman's in front of you in tears, not knowing how to take the next step, it really opens your eyes to the fact that so many women are living with pain and suffering that they just don't have the language to express it, or they don't have the safety to express it. And so as I was working with women, and the beautiful thing about working with others is you can't take them further than you've gone yourself, right? So it forced me to do my work. I started teaching yoga. I went into teaching yoga for a long time and running retreats and doing that work. But then even through that, I was uncovering, okay, why is my body reacting this way? Why do I have a cyst when I'm doing all the right things? And so as I uncovered that in myself, I really started to see that in those women, that it was their stressors, it was their story, it was the generational stories and expectations or cultural expectations that they've been carrying in their bodies for a very long time.
It's true. And as women, we do carry that, right? The cultural, I'm Indian, you're Indian. Like we have a lot of stuff culturally, like any of the immigrants into the United States, or you live in Canada, but like anytime you're talking about all these different ethnicities that exist, and we have funny movies about that, right? My Big Fat Greek Wedding and things. So all of our cultures have their different nuances. When you're speaking about this burden on women that leads to our autoimmune conditions, it is so many things around what I described in your bio, boundaries, identity, and all these things. So as you started walking down that path with clients in front of you as a naturopath, what were some of the tools that you started to pull out that did work, or the ones that didn't and kind of surprised you?
Yeah, so the first go-to for me is always understanding the physical and understanding her symptoms, because that's how it's manifesting. And then, so the first thing I'll do is do some testing so that she can put the pieces together herself and know there's something tangible that my body is expressing. So the first thing is to bring in those like easy day-to-day habits that will start supporting her, and then helping her understand why she may not have those habits. Like, why is she choosing this food over this one? So really planting these seeds of questions. So I tell her when she picks up, a slice of whatever it is, a slice of cake, maybe ask herself, is this going to deplete me or is it going to nourish me? And when we start to be more curious and have that discernment, we can bring in habits, start like habit stacking, start choosing foods and the right spices and herbs that are going to support her. So I start really simple, actually very Ayurvedic, because I have some Ayurvedic background as well, growing up, but also in my studies. So sometimes I just get her to start oiling her body.
Amazing.
and just connecting with herself, right? And you know how powerful that is.
Absolutely, especially in this day and age.
Yeah.
You know, when life is moving so fast, I've been thinking about that one a lot, like the
Yeah.
simplicity of doing a Pyong self massage and just
Yeah.
grounding ourselves every day. And
Yeah.
maybe that's the one thing we need the most.
Oh, absolutely. It's like, because that brings safety back into your body and nourishment for your nerves. And then I give her exercises, whether it's breath work or a meditation or just some simple movement to get her out of her mind in her body. So those are usually the initial stages to get her feeling good. And then when she's got that energy, now we can dive into the emotional story. Now we can dive into the mental health. And now we can understand what we need to do that deeper mulching and that deeper work.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So what inspired you to write this book and put this book together? And what are some of the key
Yeah.
pieces in the book that you want our audience to know about?
Yeah. There was two main stories and I share them in the book too. One was years ago. This was back in like 2012 when my husband and I really started diving into hormones. And I was at that time still in the mindset of, we're supposed to age. We lose our hormones, things change. Aging is graceful. Like I know in our culture, we revere aging because we're living with like 4 generations sometimes. So it's a very different relationship. Like I couldn't wait for my gray hair to come in because I watched my nanny's gray hair. I'm like, oh, she just looks so wise. I'm going to look like her. And
Yeah.
so I had this mindset, but this OBGYN we were studying under talked to a lot about like hormone therapy and just how to navigate it and how women can really benefit from it. So I'm like, okay, I'll start working with this a little bit. And so in my practice, there was a couple that came in. So Nick, my husband, worked with the husband. I worked with the wife for a few months. So we're doing lifestyle stuff, doing the nutrition, also put them on some bioidenticals. A few months later, their friend came into the clinic and I was putting his IV in. And he's like, I don't think you realize you saved a marriage.
Hmm.
And so that really forced me to pause and ask more questions like, what do you mean? It's like, well, they were at the brink of divorce, but something shifted inside of them after that work. And they're still together and they're working it out, like they're happier. So that was huge for me. And that really made me understand that how we feel in our bodies, the story that our hormones are reeling about our emotions is going to influence every relationship that we have. And then the second major one was just a little while ago, a couple of years ago, I guess, when a woman said to me, you saved my life. And, she had come to me kind of in this stage where her husband had cancer. So she was taking care of him. She's having difficulties with her daughter, neglecting her own health, was on antidepressants, didn't work for her. She was at a point where she just didn't want to be here anymore. And we did that deep work. And really, when I think back to what I actually did with her, it was really the simple things, which is giving her permission and hope that it's okay to heal. And she did that work. And then here we are today.
Yeah, it's a big deal. A lot of times
Mhm.
we, as the practitioner, are really creating space with someone in their
Yeah.
lives for their healing.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
even as a practitioner, I laugh sometimes because I hire my own practitioner teams to do that for me. Because
Hmm.
sometimes it's hard to just create space.
Yeah.
We were just chatting offline. We're both in book launches, and my book came out, and it's like, okay, now I thought magically it would come out, and I'd have all this space in my life to go focus back on my own health. And you're like, wait, no, a book actually creates momentum, and so then life starts just rolling faster.
Yeah.
And so as practitioners, you're reminded I need to bring my A team back in, my dream team, as I call them, to support me so I can stay my healthiest, most vibrant. And so, as you had those clients come through, it sounds to me like you fuse together multiple modalities and approaches to support someone. It's not just let's do a stool test and give you the right supplement and fix the gut.
Hmm.
It's not just let's bring the naturopathic wisdom through and treat with herbs and different tools. It's also a big mind body piece that you bring into
Hmm.
the equation to support these women. And so, as you started pulling this book together, what is the central thesis and the central lessons that you're imparting in this book or the central themes of it?
Yeah, the big one is that your emotions are your superpower. I think we get really overwhelmed by our emotions when we don't understand them. So when we are rageful, for example, I think in perimenopause, a lot of women will describe they're feeling a lot of rage and anger and don't know what to do with it and don't even know why it's there. So the book really helps you uncover that relationship. And when you do, you can use these emotions as tools in understanding, and it helps you understand your story even more deeply to understand what's yours to carry and what isn't. We were talking about like the cultural and the generational pieces before. Often we've been playing out a role or an identity for so long that we don't know what else there is. We don't actually know who we are. So I feel like when this like
That is
armor of your hormones start to dissolve, all of a sudden there's this opportunity for the emotions to show up and the stories to come forward, and you don't know what to do with them because it's really overwhelming. But it's such an opportunity to finally heal and to go into this next stage of life with more command that's your own. Like you are your own narrator then in your story, instead of hearing somebody else's voice constantly in your mind. So the book, like the big thesis, I guess, would be is that connection, that your hormones are your superpower. We can befriend our anxiety, we can understand our depression, we can understand the grief that we are feeling that we may not even have words or expression for. And so when we do, we can make very different decisions for ourselves.
that it's so true. I like that you said basically, I mean, I'm forgetting the word you used, but you basically said like our hormones start to drop away and
Dissolve, yeah.
yeah, they dissolve and they start to take away that armor and that shield that you had in place that was easier to hold in place before.
Yes.
I just sat down with my best friend for breakfast this week and we were talking and I said, doesn't it feel like you kind of have to choose? Like I have to choose on a given day. Is it a big workout and I'm going to work a lot less and I'm going to be a lot less nice at the end of my day because I will have no energy left in the tank for kids and household and feeding everyone with love? Versus on some days I can say, you know what, I'm just going to skip the workout and then have the space for my business, the kids, dinner, like all the things. But I said, isn't it interesting? We can't do it all anymore. There's a shift that just happened. And so you have to prioritize almost who matters more, me,
Yeah.
them, their needs, everyone else's needs. And so it's an interesting shift that happens. But you're right. If you aren't aware of your emotions and how you're feeling, because you're so used to holding up the mask or the shield to the outside world and just executing, and that's your identity, then even the identity shift is a really big deal.
Yeah, and that's where that grief comes in, is self-judgment. I know I had that moment of like, well, I used to be able to do this, this, and this and be okay at the end of the day, and I'm not anymore. And last night, I think was the first time. So when my kids are sick, they're always sleeping with me. I'm the one that's getting up. If they're coughing, I'm the one doing the steam bath, giving them the licorice, doing all that. And so I got up in the middle of the night with my son and I just woke up my husband. I'm like, can you give him the steam bath and can he sleep with you so I can do this today? And
Yeah.
I think it was the first time in the last 14 years I made that decision for myself and didn't let mom guilt take over. But it's so hard to do when our whole identity is wrapped up in maybe being that type A that gets it all done. And then when all of a sudden we can't, we feel like there's something wrong with us. But actually, I think this is the way we were supposed to operate from the beginning. And now we get to.
Right.
Yeah.
And isn't it interesting that society has kind of put this idea around us nowadays of executing on all fronts should be totally doable
Right.
until you're like 100. I
Yeah, but
should
you
be
can have it all
capable.
right now.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
we can have it all the time. And it's so interesting the give and take that shifts with our hormone health. And you're right, it's kind of like a reckoning where you're like, what is happening? And I like that you use the word grief because I think you are grieving
Mhm.
old parts of yourself that you're having to let go of that you might not want to let go of.
Mhm.
I don't want to let go of super productive Shivani who's super capable of doing 2 million things in a day.
Mhm.
I'm usually capable of leveraging my pitta, my fire, my
Yeah.
elemental design and saying, you know what, I'm just gonna go. And I
Yeah.
can go and do a million things. And to start to lose that is a big shift. And anytime I talk to my friends in their 60s and 70s, many of my friends are in their 60s, they're like,
Yeah.
Shivani, you have no idea. Like, enjoy what you've got right now. And please
Yeah.
don't complain about it because you're not in menopause yet. You have no idea what's coming.
Yeah.
And so it sounds like your work is not just like, let me give you some HRT. Like HRT has a role.
Mhm.
And every single client I've talked to today, I'm like, have you considered HRT? I'm
Mhm.
on progesterone. I think it's amazing.
Me too.
I think
Yeah.
estrogen's protective. Like, come
Yeah.
on, guys. And some of them were very hesitant. I said, it's not for everybody. Here's some
Mhm.
recommendations of great practitioners in the space. So, when you are working with clients who
Mhm.
are going through these transitions, what are some of those key things that they don't even realize are symptoms? And how do you support them in both directions, not just the
Mhm.
HRT, but the other side?
Yeah, that's a great question. So when I do the initial testing and start to understand with her symptoms, like what hormones need that extra support, I try to kind of map out how that's influencing her every day. Like for example, in perimenopause, as you probably know, like our estrogen is fluctuating up and down. And we actually have a lot of receptors for estrogen in our amygdala, which
Right.
is our emotional center. And so when we have adequate amount of estrogen, we can suppress certain fears. We don't feel as anxious. When that starts to leave, we're feeling a bit more anxious. And the body's so miraculous that they're actually showing now that the brain or the amygdala area will increase its amount of estrogen receptors in menopause to kind of compensate. But because we've lived these lives, as you know, you talk about these things around inflammation and like there's toxicity in our environment, external and internal, all these things are making our hormones decline faster than they probably would have if we weren't surrounded by all of that. So then the initial thing that I do is help her understand, okay, yes, I can give you estrogen, which is going to maybe help you in the initial couple of months. And you might feel more joyful, you might feel better. But then we're going to hit a plateau if your gut's not working, if your liver's not doing its job efficiently, if you're all of a sudden converting to the toxic form of estrogen that we don't want in your body. So we have to understand how all of these symptoms work. If your lymphatic system's really stagnant, nothing's going to flow. Your hormones are communicators. They can't communicate if your lymphatic system isn't working. So then often if she's at this like place of I'm not sleeping, I'm so anxious, I'm always irritable, I have really low libido, my muscle mass is not like it was before, I will get her started on some bioidenticals to get her feeling good. And then alongside that, I'm like, okay, let's look at what you're eating every day. Let's look at how you're moving, how you're breathing. Let's look at the nutrients we can bring in. Let's look at the herbs so we can support these systems at the same time.
Right. I agree. I
Yeah.
mean, I think of perimenopause, and I like that you use the term hormonal chaos. It's
Hmm.
this time of such big shifts. And so,
Yeah.
like you're saying, we are shifting. The body is creating a lot more things. And a lot of the women around me are like, I am more anxious, and I've never even been anxious. So I don't even understand how I could be anxious. But you're explaining it from a very biological standpoint. This is what's happening in the body, these are the shifts. And so it kind of puts an understanding in the woman's mind of like what's happening. And then on top of it, it sounds like what you're doing is really sitting down with them to say, look, this is what's happening. Let me support you. And then let's also talk about what this is unmasking, because it
Mhm.
could be unmasking something that actually does need addressing.
Yeah. And, our cycle gives us clues as to how our body is doing. So if we start listening to our cycle before we even get into perimenopause, if we start to understand, oh, I have a heavier bleed this month, what did I do? Like reverse engineer this month that could have contributed to that. Was it my diet? Did I travel? Was I under a lot of stress? Did I become more estrogen dominant these last couple of months because of stress and lower progesterone? Like, what are things that contributed to that? Because we're detoxing every month. And if we're detoxing a lot, that means there's a lot of accumulation, like AMA, right, in the toxins in our body. So we need to find ways to work on our gut, to work on that liver, so we can support ourselves at the end of the month. Same thing in perimenopause. It's just giving us clues as to what's the deeper work that needs to be worked on.
And let's highlight that for a moment. So many women who I meet have really irregular periods, heavy periods, problems with their periods. We have so many women struggling with fibroids,
Yep.
cysts, all sorts of big issues when it comes to their uterine health. And that could be something that happens in your 20s and your 30s. Right now, we're talking so much more about PCOS, endometriosis, infertility. I'm fascinated by all these topics. So I'm watching people, I'm watching the studies on it and the science on
Mhm.
it, and how we're evolving with it. I completely agree with you. That phase of life called from when you start your period all the way through until the perimenopause window that can start in our mid 30s,
Yeah.
40s and beyond is a thing to pay attention to, because according to the ancient wisdoms that we teach, it is a time of detox. It's a cycle, it is a cleanse. And when your body stops having that cleanse moment, everything is going to shift. And
Mhm.
so if you're walking into perimenopause and you've already got issues, it's a beautiful moment to say, hey, let me make sure I'm as supported as I can be so that when perimenopause comes along and the hormones really start this roller coaster fluctuation moment, I'm not thrown in on a much bigger roller coaster than I want to be on because I
Yeah.
balanced myself beforehand. And I think that's a key piece to talk about when it comes to women's health is oftentimes we are going through life. I think of it like a freight train. Like I'm usually on a racetrack and I go. And I'm so used to going, it's actually hard to pause. And it's
Yeah.
hard to take a minute and prioritize self. I even texted a practitioner yesterday. I was like, I need 2 hours. I need 2 hours. I need adrenal support. When can I come? She
Mhm.
goes, I'm blocking for you, Shivani. If you ask, that means you really need me. And I said, yeah, I actually have now come to understand I need a half day a week. I
Mhm.
have to start blocking while my kids are in school and making space for my own reboot and reset because otherwise I can just see what's about to happen. The train
Mhm.
has gone too fast, too long. It has to go into it's just like in a race car driver. You have to do the pit stops.
Yeah.
If you skip the pit stops and you're losing resilience simultaneously as you're aging,
Yeah.
then the body is really going to be in a state of turmoil. And
Mhm.
so when you see women and you talk about your new book and you
Mhm.
talk about this framework that you have, how do
Mhm.
you guide women in this framework so they can get the support that they need?
Yeah, so there's a quiz in the book that helps you actually figure out your hormonal identity. And so there's three categories. And there actually, it's funny when I did the book and I did the identities, I'm like, this is describing Pitta, Vata, and Kapha to the T.
Perfect.
It just always goes into those categories. And so like one is like the anxious overachiever, and like she may manifest different symptoms like gut health issues. She's probably the one with the irregular cycles, insomnia, and then you have the people pleaser, and then you have like the silent struggler or the perfectionist. So, and we may have parts of all of them at different seasons of our life, and one may manifest a bit more. And then
Sure.
from that, there's like certain, like, I guess, programs that you can use with like certain foods, certain movements, so certain yoga, certain breath, certain rituals every single day, and also exercises to uncover the why behind that identity, which is so important. And so when we start to understand that, yes, like there's no moments to pause, we actually have to make a conscious decision to do that. We start to realize that, we've been living a certain way, and it isn't until our body starts to like shut down or someone around us tells us, like I had a woman the other day say, my son was like, I don't know which mom I'm getting every day. And
Right.
that is what brought her to me. So we don't want to get to those places and then take care of ourselves. And when, if you have a fibroid, if you have a cyst, like you're accumulating. So understanding why that accumulation is there, there's actually a study that I talk about in the book where they followed 66,000 women over 16 years. And they found that every woman that had a fibroid had some sort of childhood abuse, whether it's emotional, sexual, or physical. So it goes to show how interconnected everything is. And then your body's trying to tell you what your story is and what we can release every single month.
Right. Absolutely. And when you talk about story and you talk
Mhm.
about people pleasing versus perfectionist versus anxious overachiever versus there was one
Silent struggler.
silent struggler. I mean, it does correlate beautifully to the
Mhm.
Ayurvedic body types and constitutions, right? And
Mhm.
it's interesting to me as people who move through life, if we can understand what our body type is and what our constitution is, and thus our tendencies, we
Yes.
could actually have so much awareness between like impetus and action. And so in my case, I always share, I'm sure if someone's listening to my podcast, they know I'm a Pitta, I'm a fire. And so I'm always like, racetracks, let's go. I just want to be an F1 driver one day in this life. Like I'm so into like everything fast,
Yeah.
everything hot. I'm like
Yeah.
I eat hot sauce all day, even though I know it imbalances me kind of girl. Like like that intensity of
Mhm.
fire. And so my homework is always decompression. It's why I teach all the self-care tools so much. Like tea time is me time. Like just
Oh,
pause,
yeah. Me
hydrate,
too.
have some tea, calm down. Like
Yeah.
every tool. I need Ayurveda's breath work. I need Ayurveda's yoga. That's why I did yoga teacher training, so I could build a yoga practice that would feed me.
Yeah.
And so when you work with these types of women, who I think anyone who's listening could be like, I think I'm two of those, maybe three of those. Why is she talking about me? That's the beauty of the ancient wisdoms coming
Yeah.
forward, and us taking that ancient science and the modern sciences and pulling them together in a way that we can use. And so
And they can
how do
understand. Yeah.
exactly, and understand self and understand each other, so that in community we can support each other too. So
Yeah.
how do you guide based on your different types? Can you
Yeah.
highlight each type a little bit for the audience today,
Yeah.
and then give some tips for them?
Yeah, so like the anxious overachiever. So she's often like, the one that's scheduled everything. She's going from one thing to the next. She's probably like a CEO of something, whether it's her household or like her business. But she's someone that's on the go and probably is more pitta, right? Because it's got that fire and that action. And so for her, I have this like 5M model. So the first one being like movement. So figuring out, okay, what's the kind of movement that's really going to support her? Because the desire is going to be to work hard and to push hard. So if I tell her Shavasana is what I want you to do, it's not going to work. So I'm going to give her movement, that there's still movement in there, but it's just slowing down a little bit to give her that space or that like freedom in her body. And then for food, yes, there's going to be more cooling foods. There's going to be more detoxification. There's going to be more liver support. And then for mindset, I see questions for her. Like, how do you define success? Because often we characterize ourselves as the overachiever because we're trying to prove something to someone. Somewhere along the way in our journey, we weren't seen or heard as we are, but we were seen and heard if we performed. And so for her to journal on and understand where does this performance come from? And how is it serving me and how is it depleting me? Because we need elements of her, right? We need that. We both of us needed that these months when we're launching our books.
Yeah.
And then it's understanding your capacity and your true nature. My true nature is Vata.
Okay.
So this winter being my launch was not good for me. And I even actually said that to the publisher. I'm like, next time,
Yeah.
we're not launching in the winter because
No.
my body wants to go internal. I need to like oil and like go inside and like nourish myself. I can't take action in these months.
Yeah.
And so when you understand that about yourself, like you said, you can make those decisions for the future. And then so for the silent struggler, I mean, she's the one that hasn't used her voice for a long time. So I often find her, she's going to have the thyroid issues. Like I had one patient who has this massive goiter and done all the physical work. We've done all that. It wasn't until we actually started working on her story of caretaking of everybody around her that something started to shift inside here. And so when you start to see those connections between like your identity and what your body is telling you, because you're fighting against your true nature.
True.
You're fighting against what you need. And then that perfectionist, she often had to show up that way to be loved. And so when you're like really like, don't have flexibility in your mind about anything, about your structure, about everybody else's structure. So the judgment you have on yourself, you're going to have on others as well. So she's quite violent towards herself internally and then making all the wrong choices. She may even need, Netflix at night, wine at night, coffee in the morning, like all those things to help her keep going. And so for her, it's like helping her understand the beauty that she already has. So it's helping her pause and helping her see that she can mess up a little bit. I even have exercises in there of like, we're going to do something just a little bit imperfect today. Like send a text that doesn't make sense because that would drive her crazy. Right? Like really, really
That's
small
hilarious.
things that would drive someone crazy. We're going to do just a little, like kind of exposure therapy with that.
I could not do that. If you gave that to me as my homework, I'd be like, I'm sorry, pick another chore.
Yeah. Just send a weird emoji or something. I don't know.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
I love that. It's so true though.
She needs more play.
To break the habits, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's break that pattern, break that habit so you can feel free again.
Yeah.
And like if you think about how we were as like a child, until we became really aware and conscious of these identities that we needed to feel safe or to be seen, It's like, if we go back to her, like, she was wild, like, she was free, like, she thought she was the shit, like, so you want to go back to her again.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And you're right. I mean, over time, we get so inhibited and so stuck in our ways based on our
Yeah.
childhood experiences. It's why in Ayurvedic medicine, too, we're trying to rewind back and understand what
Yeah.
was the impetus for the change. Because
Yeah.
usually, if your elemental design, as I call it, or dosha has
Yeah.
shifted,
Yeah.
there was an impetus, there was a moment, there was something. It was either a trauma or a big
Mhm.
struggle or a health moment or something happened in your life that caused that shift.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. There's always like a before and after. And I had that moment because I had something happen to me when I was around 8. And
Mm.
when I really started to uncover that story, I was like, wow, yeah, like I was so different before. Like
Right.
that moment took away my freedom to express. Like it took away my personality. It took away so many things. And even now, I still struggle to bring pieces of her out. So even this whole experience of being seen so
Yeah.
much has been really draining on my body because it does not feel safe. And I'm trying to break that pattern of like, it's safe, it's okay. And it takes time. I think it's like lifetime of work to uncover who she was before that moment.
Yeah, absolutely. And so many people have had experiences like that, and many aren't aware that that was the
Mhm.
moment. Like sometimes it takes hypnotherapy and things like that, different tools to kind of dig, and go back and understand what was it that
Mhm.
was that moment of shift that's kind of blocking me and
Yeah.
preventing me from moving forward.
Yeah. And for some, it may not even be one moment. It may have been the micro moments
Sure.
in their childhood. Like maybe it was, mom was too busy because she's a single mom, so she's working and whatever, and wasn't able to give you the attention that you needed. And maybe it was those single moment or micro moments at school where you felt left out. Like all these things accumulate and then create that identity or personality that we try on over and over again, and then one just kind of gets fixed for some time. So yeah, I think that the trauma work is so important, but not also to get wrapped up in that story, but to use that story to be able to let go of what the body and the brain and the mind are holding on to.
Right. It's true. And you mentioned boundaries. When
Mhm.
we talk about the different body types or the different personality types that you described, I think one big issue we see in women's health, especially as we start to approach the perimenopause, menopause years, is a shift in our need to hold boundaries,
Mhm.
which probably no one in our lives is used to, but it's really self-preservation. And so
Mhm.
that's a big conversation that my friends and I have a lot. And I talk to a lot of my clients about as well, which is as you're shifting, you have to protect your energy. You have to protect, your time for some self-care, your time to do the things that will actually keep your hormone health balanced and supported. And so how do you guide your clients when it comes to like how do you guide them on boundaries so that
Mhm.
it can influence their hormone stability? Right.
Yeah, I get them to actually figure out what their values are and what's their anchor. So an anchor could be, for example, when I identified mine this last year, it's my 2 boys. They're
Mm.
11 and 14. They're growing up. I'm not going to have a lot more time. I mean, I hope I have a lot of time with them, but they're becoming little men and they're going to create their own lives. And these are the moments that I want to like cherish. And so anything that's pulling me away from that, I'm able to now say no to. And so when you have that anchor and those values really defined, it makes it a lot easier. And it's going to ruffle feathers because people aren't used to us saying no. It hasn't been modeled. We've been modeled like sacrifice is the way. And so there has to be this like shift and dynamic. And often in relationship, that can be a struggle. So if your partner is used to you doing all the work and saying yes to everything, all of a sudden you're like, nope, I'm done. So there has to be this like graceful conversation around the fact that, the way I've been operating has not been working. And so this is what I need to say yes to and to say no to. Ask yourself those questions like, do I feel energized after this? Or will I feel depleted after this? That's going to inform you what to say yes to and what to say no to, because that could still be work. Some work that you do, like I know after this conversation, I'm going to feel energized because it's a beautiful conversation.
Yeah.
But, something else that I might say yes to might deplete me. And so that gives me clues. Okay, maybe that's not what I do all the time. And so I think first identifying for yourself what it
Right.
is that you need, then we can have clear conversations. I have a friend that always uses the phrase, to be clear is to be kind.
Mm.
So if we're clear, then we can, with kindness, set up those healthy boundaries and not feel obligated to say yes.
It's so true. And when I was thinking about our interview today, I thought about how you talk so much about relationships and why do some women experience like such dissatisfaction or frustration or less tolerance in their relationships as we walk into perimenopause, menopause? Like what role does oxytocin, our hormones, our estrogen even, what role does that play
Yeah.
when it comes to how we even approach our relationships going
Yeah.
into our 40s and beyond?
Yeah, so estrogen's the hormone that activates like dopamine and serotonin. So it helps us feel joyful. And in that too, it can also help us mask some things that maybe we're not feeling joyful about when we have like adequate amounts. Progesterone helps us feel calm because it's activating GABA. So it allows our nervous system to respond instead of react. And testosterone is also kind of like that motivator, right? Like we feel have that zest for life, like, that pitta fire that you were talking about. And then when we're losing that, that's a challenge. Whereas oxytocin's our bonding hormone. So depending on our upbringing, depending on our relationship with mom, so she's the first relationship we have on this earth. And depending on the stories that we gathered from when we were in the womb, because we're informed by her hormones about the environment that we're stepping into. So if that was an environment of stress, then we kind of already come into this world a little bit more hypervigilant and not really able to kind of be resilient to the stress that we might manage. And that studies have clearly shown that correlation. And so when these hormones again are dissolving in perimenopause, then all of a sudden the feelings that we were able to mask, and the biggest one I think is resentment for women, because we may be saying yes to many things before, but we didn't want to. So then there is this like internal dialogue. There's internal resentment that we're just holding on to because we want everyone just to see how much we're suffering, but they're not paying attention. They're not saying no for me. They're not understanding. And so we're holding on to this resentment, and all of a sudden it's just bubbling, and then it starts to show up. And now all of a sudden we're snapping in perimenopause because the hormones are like, I don't got you anymore. So you are fully
Have
able to
yourself.
express this. Yeah, or it's going to show up in your body. Like, in Chinese medicine, the liver holds on to anger. So if your liver is compromised, you're not detoxing. That means you will have fibroids or cysts. And I've seen that over and over again, not only with patients, but even with my own family and myself. And so I think it really is this big unleashing of these emotions that we've been holding on to towards our relationships.
Do you believe fibroids in the body is a combination of accumulation of toxins, because of course we're living in a toxic world, but also based on the last answer you just gave me, also like emotions that are stuck that we choose
Absolutely.
not to address? I had a fibroid before and I got a fibroid embolism with a doctor who I've had on my podcast, Dr. Patia from here in Miami. He operated the embolism. And I went down the whole road. For me, if I'm going to choose a surgical or pharma solution, I need a PhD on the topic first, because that's my last option I want to choose on all the spectrum of options. So I went through all my options, which was like, can turmeric fix this? Which is always my first question.
Yeah.
Can super spices fix this? Can I ginger and cumin and cinnamon my way out of it? No. Okay. Got it. Back then I was not into HRT because it was like a long time ago, perimenopause. Then I went to different practitioners who were more like Reiki, lymphatic, like went down the whole road of options. And I remember a practitioner saying, this is your sacral chakra. This is your seat of creativity, orange chakra, uterine. That's like your sacral. So where are you not actually stepping forward in your creativity? And it hit me. And I was like, oh gosh, how did she read me that well? I had a book in me that I wanted to write, and I had written it 3 summers in a row and thrown it in the trash. Because I was like, that's not good enough trash. That's not good enough trash every time. And I kept thinking, one day I'll write a good enough book. And then, of course, a couple of years later, Hay House calls and it's like, we want a book with you. And then I really did sit and write the best book I humanly could, which is my current book. And it's just interesting to me, the idea of bringing in the emotional conversation. And so will you speak into that a little bit?
Yeah, it's everything that you just said. It's stagnation of emotion. When we're feeling stuck in our lives, we're going to be stuck in our body. And so when we're holding on, it's really hard for our body to let go. So I have this saying, it's like how we digest life is a reflection of how we digest our food. And if we're not digesting well, we're not releasing. And so that energy has to go somewhere. And on a physiological level, if you're under a lot of stress, your progesterone turns into cortisol to support you, which is your stress hormone. And if that's happening on a chronic level, and this could be because of traffic or, making sure the kids are okay in the morning, just like on that go, go, go kind of mode. But the brain doesn't tell the difference between you being in danger and you just doing life right now. So then if we're constantly pouring into cortisol, now we've created this gap between progesterone and estrogen. So we have estrogen dominance. Estrogen feeds fibroids. So there's accumulation of estrogen. But what lets go of estrogen? Your liver, your gut. Those are the two systems, and your lymphatic system that support that release. So if we're not releasing, if we're holding on really tightly, the fibroids will show up. And then when we're carrying that big story, it's often a story that we're not even aware of, especially if it's coming from childhood. It's got to go somewhere. So it's going there. And then, yes, I have found through working with women with fibroids, detoxing, using often progesterone can be really supportive as well, for really doing that deep rooted emotional work and creating more flow in that pelvic floor, getting her dancing, getting her moving, getting her expressing, and some sort of creativity is like the magic trio.
Nice. That's amazing. And have you found these types of kind of frameworks for yourself for women in endometriosis, infertility, things like that as well?
Oh, absolutely. Endometriosis, I feel like, is the hardest one that I've come across. It takes a long time for that one. But yeah, unexplained infertility. I just had a couple, they're on baby number 2 now, which is amazing. But before baby number 1, they were told they would never conceive naturally. And she was carrying quite the story. And it took me about 6 months to even, because I saw it the first day. I knew what she was carrying. But I had to build safety. I had to help her understand why her body was in that autoimmune condition and all these things were showing up for her. And then as we did that, and then the one day I said, I'm like, tell me more about what you're actually carrying. She's like, I knew you knew. And we started to do that work. And yeah, they're on baby number 2 now.
Amazing.
So I think the body is just so miraculous in caring for us. And it's always working for us, but we often feel betrayed by it when we can't control it. And so when we understand what it's trying to tell us, the language that it's speaking, and I feel like it speaks through our hormones and our emotions, then we can make those different decisions.
True. And it's a powerful argument also for Ayurvedic detox because when I do take the time, I haven't taken that time in a little while, but when you take that time to do a big detox and like really layer by layer dig into the body and clean and clear, if you could partner that with what you're talking about, which is that depth of emotional understanding as well of what's sitting stored in those layers, not just release them physically, but also on the emotional, spiritual, mental level, then all of a sudden we're talking about profound healing.
Oh yeah. We had this couple go through this detox with us, and this was just like a group detox. It was very physical. Like I would plant seeds of emotions and like journal entries. And at the end of it, we asked like, what do you feel like you gained from it? What did you learn? And they're like, better communication. Out of all the physical, like they got, they have more energy, they're sleeping better, all these things happen. But the key thing that they learned from it was like, we're communicating better. So when we detox ourselves, there's more room, there's more space for the body to communicate. It actually will bring up old emotions because we're carrying them in ourselves. And so when we're detoxing physically, there's an opportunity to detox emotionally as well.
True. It's so true. And I think that's actually the path to the future for people's health is to bring together those worlds of understanding that we are sitting under layers of toxic burden, we can call it, or life's burdens and all that we consume, because we consume so much from not just the physical level, but like we've talked about today, the mental level, the emotional level, spiritual level. I talk about it in my book as mental inflammation. I was writing my book and then I was sitting with the universe and I pray a lot and I'm like, I need a name for this idea. Can you give me a name? And the name came to me of mental inflammation. And I was like, that is a new term. I love it. Let's use that. And it was to describe this idea that every single thing we're consuming is accumulating. And the mental inflammation we're choosing to take on by being on social media, consuming the news and the news cycles and all that
Yeah.
is causing physical inflammation. And then that physical inflammation causes more mental inflammation. And we're in this feedback loop. And it sounds like in your teachings, you're talking so much about how, as women, we're kind of blaming hormones, we're blaming a lot of things. But what we need to look at is the inside story. What
Mhm.
is really deep seated underneath? What is underneath all those layers? What is the story that's driving this car? And we don't even realize is the driver because we think we are the driver.
Yeah, absolutely. It's that autopilot that we're on. When you step in your car and you end up at your destination and you don't even know how you got there. I feel like most of us are living our lives in that way. And then sometimes it takes something to happen for us to become really conscious and aware. And then when we are aware, okay, now here's the opportunity. And I do find if we haven't been when we're in to go into perimenopause, that's what creates that opportunity because now everything does look a bit more clear. If there's struggles in a relationship too, like I often tell women, even when they're having a regular cycle, if you've got PMS every single month, if you're feeling anxious, if you're feeling irritable, what's the theme? Like, what are the things that are coming up? Like, notice that theme. Like, what are the thoughts? Like, are you being judgmental? Are you judging people outside of yourself? Are your needs not being met in certain ways? There's always a story that's being told because of the story that we're carrying.
Sure. And so, as you wrote this book, as you've seen incredible client stories that have gone from, really suffering to miraculous, as you've done this work over the years, what does actually thriving mean to you in each season
Mm,
of life? Because thriving is a whole different feeling. And
yeah.
then when a woman reads this book, what is it that they want, that you want for them to get from it?
Yeah, so with every season, it's funny. I actually like separate them in the Ayurvedic seasons too, from like Kapha, Pitta, and Vata. When you're in that Kapha stage, like everything is should be joyful.
Yeah.
Up until we go into our get our period, like that childhood, that time is like everything is just like we're creating seeds, we're planting seeds, and then as soon as you menstruate and you go into that new phase, that's where like self-discovery, right? So that is I call that the vitality phase. So the first phase, I call it the curious phase because you're curious about the world, you're open and your eyes are wide open. And then you go into that vitality phase where you're like lots of energy. And so my hope is in this phase, and if women are reading that book in that phase, they're just self-discovering over and over again and just understanding themselves, understanding what their body is telling them. And then as you're moving through that wise woman era or that wise woman phase, that's where I feel like the magic really happens when you really go inwards. Because that vitality phase is about the external world, right? We're in service of our family, we're in service of the community, we're doing all of that. And in that, though, we need to fill ourselves up so that we can play that role and be of service. And then when we go into the wise woman time, it's a different kind of service. We now get to impose our wisdom onto the next generation. And we can only do that if we heal ourselves, if we understand ourselves. And so my hope is with the book, one, women feel like they're not alone and that they don't feel like everything's just going on in their heads, like that they're going crazy, because you're not. We're in this together. It's just, I think now there's more voices that are speaking about it, whereas the generation before, like I often think of them, my mom had a hysterectomy and she is that like typical Indian wife where she's doing all the cooking and the cleaning and supporting. My parents have a beautiful relationship, but you could see how lopsided it is when it comes to like family care. And I'm like, how does she still keep doing that when she was going through all of this and didn't talk to anyone about it?
Right.
And so I think giving a voice to these challenges is really important. So I hope through the book, it sparks conversation, it sparks curiosity so that you can thrive by becoming you, by falling in love with yourself, by like befriending your emotions. I feel like that is where thriving is going to show up because then you're making the decisions for you and what you need.
I love that. What a beautiful way to wrap us up today. Thank you, Dr. Sonya. You've been incredible. I cannot wait to read this book. I'm like, I need the book. All my clients
We
need this
all
book.
do.
This was amazing. And I would love for you to share any last thoughts and where everyone can find you.
Yeah, you can find me on Instagram at Dr. Sonya Jensen, and the book you can get at healyourhormonesbook.com. And I think the last thing I would say is just, have discernment and curiosity and flexibility and play, and just also just knowing that our time here is so limited. Like when we start to look at that bigger picture of like the one common thing we all have is one day we are going to leave this physical form, and how do we want to express while we are here? How do we want to live? How do we want to love? How do we want to be loved? Like it's your birthright to have joy in your life, and you are worth it. So I think if we can anchor into that, it just makes it so much more simple. It makes the decisions more simple too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for coming on here and sharing your wisdom with my audience. Everyone who's listening, visit Dr. Sonya Jensen, check out her book, all about hormone health. And if you're listening to this episode today, please like, subscribe, share it with someone in your life who can benefit from this wisdom. Leave a review that helps us get this wisdom out into the world. This podcast is The Inflammation Code. I'm your host, Dr. Shivani Gupta. My website is my name, shivanigupta.com, and I'm at dr.shivanigupta on Instagram. Thank you guys for joining us today for this wonderful episode. I hope it served you like it served me, and I'll see you guys next week on the podcast.
Right.
Bye, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Sonya.
Thank you.